All right, welcome to another episode of The Postscript, a weekly podcast from Living Faith Bible Institute, as well as a YouTube series. You can follow our YouTube series if you just search for The Postscript on YouTube. You can check us out at thepostscriptshow.com. The reason we do The Postscript is because we want to get to know pastors. We want to know their hearts. We want to hear their experiences in ministry. We want to hear what God's been showing them from His Word. And we want to challenge you, the listener, to be strengthened and edified from God's Word. And so this week I have the privilege of talking to missionary on deputation, Kale Horvath, who God is called to leave his church, leave his ministry of working with young people, and to go to Hungary and serve there. So we're really excited to talk to him and talk about his story. Welcome, Kale, to The Postscript.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
So you are involved in like 100 podcasts. It seems like you have your hand.
I've become the podcast guy.
You're the podcast guy.
Yeah, and mission focused people, they're never like, "Hey, you're like missionary or pastor." No, it's hey, you're the guy who does the podcast.
Right. Yeah. But here you are. You're on camera now. This is a little
I'm not
bit
used
different.
to that. I'm not used to that because I'm not that good looking. So
no, neither am I though. I don't know how I got this job. But man, I'm glad you're here. Again, like you mentioned, we're here for Mission Focus. By the time this comes out, it'll be like.
Well, I wasn't going to say a date, so you did kind of just ruin
I gave
that.
it away. It's okay.
I just said when I was at Mission Focus.
Yeah, when you that's true.
See?
You know all the podcast.
Yep.
The whole podcast trickery there.
Right.
But man, we're glad you're here, and you're actually here to share your heart about Hungary. And I'm hoping that we can talk about that a little bit now. But your background is in youth ministry.
Yes, sir.
And you kind of came out of youth ministry as a student and just kept going.
Never stopped.
Right, you just never stopped.
Right.
Ride or die youth ministry.
Yeah.
Tell us about how God did that.
Man, it's cool. Like I don't really get to tell that story much at all, but because it really isn't. I don't know. It doesn't come up. But
youth ministry, oddly.
Well, like how I got into, you know what I mean? So when I always tell people, kind of the beginning of my story is like I felt called to be a pastor when I was 16. I was just in high school. And the reason I say feel called, I mean, we know, 1 Timothy 3, the desire to have the desire to be a bishop is a good work. And so, I mean, I don't mean anything magical. I just mean I desired, but it was more than a desire because when I was 16, I was in high school. I was starting to become a leader. I went through our youth discipleship at First Baptist Church in New Philly, Ohio. And I was becoming a leader. I was starting to help on the worship team, starting to lead on the worship team, and really just starting to, which is really the goal for any youth pastors, as kids move up from being underclassmen to upperclassmen, like don't just come to youth group for yourself. Make the transition to being a leader and coming here for others. And I was starting to do that, and I noticed that the middle school at that time. We had a lot of middle schoolers coming to the high school, and we had enough people at our church that we had those as separate ministries. But it's like the middle schoolers
just by choice, they wanted to be a part of what was going on in the high
school. Right.
Okay.
So we had this thing where the former youth pastor, when I was in high school, we didn't have a youth building at our church, and he rented a facility in downtown because he wanted to reach kids who wouldn't go to a church. It was a whole like 2005 thing.
Right.
It was this whole thing. But it worked really well for a while, but the middle schoolers wanted to come to that instead, and I just remember feeling, and this was my first feeling of burden, like wanting to pastor kids. I'm like, man, I really want them to go to their thing. I feel bad, and I wasn't even blaming whoever the middle school guy was back then, but like, why don't they want to go to their own ministry? Like, what can I do? I remember talking to my disciple or my youth pastor, like, is there anything I can do? And they're like, I mean, maybe someday, man, but you just need to. But that was my first time really feeling a burden to like lead kids. And when I graduated high school, 18-ish years old, I went into the middle school as a volunteer. That burden never left, 2 years later. And so I went in as a volunteer, and then just, kept volunteering and, helping on worship teams and stuff too, but then just became like a ministry intern, became the middle school leader, and just, all the way up to end up being the youth pastor at our church.
Yeah. So obviously God gave you a vision from even early age to work with young people. And I want to ask you about how that translates into the work in Hungary here later. But as far as what you've learned, because I came up the same way. Like I got kind of thrown into. I think the major difference is that you had a desire to initially work with students. I didn't initially have that desire. The desire came later, but I got kind of thrown into it because Midtown
Filling a
needed
need. Yeah,
fulfilling a need.
It's just a
and the
fantastic way to
burden.
see how you fit, right?
Sure.
Find your shape in ministry.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, like, youth ministry is this kind of, it can be a weird black hole
Yeah,
in a church.
absolutely.
And people never understand it. They don't know what you're doing over there. It's kind of like, you can feel really lonely. Like, there's a lot of things about it that are difficult. Can you tell us about how you retained a vision over the years, year after year? How how did you continue to find excitement for youth ministry and have renewed vision? What do you think God did to
Man, and I'm not even saying this just to blow smoke at you,
Sure.
but like honestly, so I've been coming to Mission Focus, which happened at an earlier, date before right now. But I've been coming to Mission Focus like literally since I was like 21 years old, and like I'm almost 30 now.
Yeah.
And so like I actually would not plan my January series until I came to Mission Focus, because just fellowshipping with people, hearing all the amazing preachers speak, God would always give me some new vision, either for the year or just for January. Like, hey, let's just, let's take a second to reset. And so Mission Focus actually played a big role in me just being like, okay, what's the direction for this year, or at least this month, because January is a reset button month anyway.
It stoked the fire.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was a huge thing. But like you're saying, there's so many things with youth ministry that can make it such a challenge as a ministry. And one of the big things, and I see this now kind of in retrospect, looking back on those years in youth ministry, I had 6 years leading youth ministry and about 10 years just involved in youth ministry.
Right.
And it's very often, whether you're a middle school guy, a high school guy, a complete volunteer leading all 6th through 12th grade, it's a stepping stone ministry gig. And that's okay, but you can't view it as that.
No.
You know what I mean? And you really don't see this until, and maybe you see, now on the other side of being in high school ministry, like it is a stepping stone because you're cutting your teeth on preaching.
Yep.
You're cutting your teeth on leading people, a lot of times volunteers who are older than you. Like you're 22 or 24. Like, how do I lead this 40-year-old guy who just wants to volunteer?
Sure.
That's a good thing. But the problem is if you focus all on it being a stepping stone, like what's the next thing, you're blowing it.
No. And that's so many guys are in that place where, I think it's a construct of the business commercial orientation of the church today, right? So like a guy gets out of seminary, his first gig is student ministry at some church. Yep. He's 22, he's young. Let's give him the job as a youth guy.
Right.
Knowing
you just got to pay your dues.
That he's just paying his dues, looking for the next step. And if you have that mentality, even in our fellowship of churches, it could be poisonous to the work itself, because what it says is that these people aren't as valid as the 20-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, the people with families.
And how important is children's and youth ministry? It's the most important gigs there are in ministry, because that is the foundation. Look at all, you've done this, the Barna studies and stuff. Yeah. People who get saved, the majority of them get saved either as a child or a preteen. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like nowadays in 2019, 2020, if you're really, high school ministry is too late even to, you know what I mean? Like that point we're doing damage control. Yeah. It's, I read a book once when I was in middle school ministry, and I don't even remember what it was, or the book wasn't even that good, obviously, because I don't remember. I remember one illustration that the guy was like, listen, middle school ministry is important. Everyone overlooks it, because high school ministry, he likened it to a city that's on a cliff. And every year, all the kids, they run and they jump off the cliff. And they're like, man, we got to figure out how to, what are we going to do about this problem? And they're like, I know. We're going to build a hospital at the bottom of the cliff. And then, when they jump off the cliff, we'll help them. That's high school ministry. A lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times it's high school ministry. They've already jumped off the cliff, and middle school ministry is, let's get them to not jump off the cliff. Sure. And it's getting younger and younger.
It is.
It's getting younger and younger as the years go by, man.
There's a million variables there, but man, kids are having, inappropriate relationships with people on the internet by the time they're in 6th and 7th grade. Right. And so like there are so many different detrimental things that are affecting kids. Parents don't know what to do. So youth ministers don't know what to do. Yeah. They're throwing everything at it.
Well, and so if you're just the guy who's looking at it as your stepping stone job into bigger and brighter things, man, you're not only missing the opportunity of really investing in people and the ministry God's given you now, but like you're blowing maybe one of the more important ministry opportunities of really affecting youth before they have the time to screw all that.
Right. You know, we talk about it. I'm sure you hear this too, but we talk about it in terms of concrete that's setting. And when they're in elementary school, it's just they're just slush. But their brains are beginning to develop by middle school. They're looking for identity. The concrete begins to set. By the time they're seniors in high school, man, there's so much about who they are is already determined. They've determined that they're going to be, in terms of their character, their emotional stance in life, the way they see things, perspectives are already beginning to take root. And really, the most precious and appropriate time to be reaching and winning people is between 6th and 12th grade, when you can influence the way that concrete sets.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the sad thing is that the world, and I think, you know, whether we're parents or ministers or whatever, we just don't think about the fact that the world has them 24/7, and we get them for an hour or two a week. And like, we're focused on playing games. It's like, I'm not against games. I'm not anti-games, man. I got some good games, you know. We can play Chubby Bunny with the best of them, man. Like,
you're probably way better. Knowing you're probably way better at the game thing than I was.
I loved games, man. But like, man, if we're not focusing on, and so my thing when I was our youth ministry at FBC was called Ignite, and our vision statement for that was spark the hearts of students for God and His Word. And I really prayed about that for a long time, and I really felt like for me, and in our area and context, of course, you know, even our area is different. You know, we're Northeast Ohio, small town, versus Kansas City, urban. Like, everybody's got a different context. So, you know, you got to take it for what it's worth. But really, for me, I just felt like if I can get these high school kids to come out of high school after 4 years of being in our youth ministry, and maybe hopefully longer if they came up through our church, what if I could get them to really fall in love with God through His Word? Well, I think they're going to be okay, because it's such a low bar today in Laodicea. But man, if you can really get a kid who graduates at 18 years old and loves God because he has a relationship with Him through His Word, oh my goodness, that kid is leaps and bounds above so many adults.
Yeah,
you know,
the trajectory, it has to be set. I mean, what you're doing is you're calibrating so that when they do launch, they're headed the right direction. And they're headed towards the landing pad. And if they're not going to make it to the landing pad at this point, then you know that's on them. And it's tough. You know, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, this is kind of a big question, but what are some of the best ways, like if you were to communicate to all of the head pastors of churches, like right, what could head pastors do or know or be aware of to protect the youth of their church and make sure that the trajectory is right? What are some of the things that pastors have to know, things that get neglected?
Yeah. Well, one thing, and I love, so my pastor is Jeff Bartell. When you know, that I worked for, and I love, Jeff isn't a micromanager, and he gave me so much room to experiment, to mind the budget, to fail, and to succeed. You know what I mean? Like all those, like that was, man, if youth, I know that so many pastors, they hire youth pastors and they don't trust them. That's kind of like the running joke on Twitter is like, you know, the youth pastor falls asleep in the meeting or whatever. We don't trust the youth pastor because he's not a grown up.
They're made out to be like immature. And
they're just a kid. It's like, well, listen, if you hired a kid as your youth pastor, that's on you, man. That's a you problem. That's not your youth pastor's problem. But really, man, if you can just trust him and give him the space to fail, to succeed. Now, hold him accountable. Hold them responsible. Don't let them spend, 4 hours a day at Taco Bell meeting with. I mean, like, there's work to be done. But having that freedom to try things and to flex and to fail and to learn from the failures and be like, hey, why didn't this go well? How can we learn? But also just investing the money, because I know some every church is hurting for finances. I get that. But youth ministry isn't, well, no ministry is, but especially youth ministry, it doesn't make money.
No.
Kids don't have money to give. They only spend money, and you only spend money on them. So you just have to be okay with not every summer camp, not every youth thing is going to cover its expenses by whatever you charge the kids to get in. You just have to be okay with that. And if you're willing to trust God, just like we do for missions or any other finance, and just be like, we're going to allocate this much funding.
This is an investment,
If we really mean what we say, that kids are our future and they're the church of tomorrow, well, hey man, we got to invest the funds, and we got to allow our youth pastor the responsibility in the room to learn how to budget that, and if he screws up, tell him, hold him accountable.
Were there times in youth ministry where you felt lonely? Like it was like no one
always
else on the
feel
staff.
lonely.
Yeah, right. Well, that's a whole nother problem.
Well,
That's
yeah.
again, that's
We can
too-
talk later
That's
about
too
that.
much of the hardcore
Yeah.
music, I think.
Well, you know.
It does that to you.
It could be.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
makes you
sometimes
feel-
I
it
just
makes you-
need to put some eyeliner on and paint my fingernails black and go listen to some dashboard confession, I guess.
Right, you're gonna have to take that up with the Lord and and your playlist. But one of the things I realized in youth ministry, a lot of times I felt like I didn't really have anybody that could fully understand the issues that I was dealing with, and I had to go. It was just me and the Lord in those seasons. Like I could have conversations, but the person wouldn't ever fully understand the difficulty of like working with people 10 years younger than you all the time that like didn't wear deodorant and didn't have hygiene and didn't know how to live
Right.
and didn't know how to
And
think
constantly
straight.
let you down
And
and like never
and
hold up
they
their end of
hurt-
the bargain.
They disappear.
Yeah.
And so, man, there were times that were just seasons that were dark.
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely.
So where did you go in those seasons?
Oh, man, a geographic location. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, man. It's for me. Well, the cool thing is, you know, and not every youth pastor and church maybe staff dynamic is the same. But I felt like I could always talk that out with the guys on staff and just be like, man, this is just where I'm at. What do you guys think? You know, what I mean, because sometimes you get so bogged down because you're in it all the time.
Yeah.
Just hearing someone say something who's not in it, like might say something obvious. And you're like, oh man, I never thought about that.
Sure.
And it's like, well, why not? It's just been tough tilling lately, man. You know,
Yeah.
I got kids letting me down. I had, you know, things I can't even really say on camera,
Right,
but things you
sure.
just have to deal with in youth ministry that like you never thought that you would ever have to deal with. You know,
Absurd
like
stuff.
kids doing absurd things, parents being okay with absurd, just things that you're like, how do I have to? And you just kind of feel like you're crazy sometimes, and then you just need an adult to maybe like my wife feels sometimes about being home all day with the kids. Like I just need an adult to talk to, right?
Yes.
So just having those good friends who are in the ministry, it was, I don't even remember what year this was. You were the youth pastor here still, and you just had like all the youth pastors who were at Mission Focus come hang around a round table once and just talk, and that was just good, man.
Man,
Like,
I
just
needed that.
Have friends that are youth pastors,
Yeah.
or just friends that are pastors in general. But man, other guys who know what you're going through.
Sure.
That's really helpful.
Sure. And we need to continue to support that, I think, in Living Faith Fellowship, is find ways for the youth directors and the youth pastors and the people that work with youth to come together. Because even at Mission Focus, they're down there serving.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
They're hard at work trying
You're
to train those
always
kids.
serving.
And but man, I really do believe that youth ministers like you do set the bar high. I mean, when you're saying that you believe that these young people count, it's clear that you mean that.
Oh, thanks.
And so it's a great testimony.
Well, another thing I always tried to do with the friends that I made, because I always lived in Northeast Ohio. I didn't get out a whole lot into, visiting other churches. But you don't realize that, like, man, I had a special thing. Our church was able to, like, employ me full time to do the youth department.
Yeah.
And not a lot of churches have that. So
No.
a lot of youth ministers, they just get spent.
Yes.
Because they're bivocational or they're completely volunteer. They're leading 6th through 12th grade, in their spare time.
Right.
And so I always really just tried to help anyone who wanted, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm figuring stuff out as I go too. But like, if I have a guy from Georgia texting me like, hey man, have you ever done anything like this? Yeah, man, actually I did. Because I knew that like I had just the luck of the draw to have the time to spend on something that he doesn't. Like, yeah, man, here you go. Hopefully this can help you, save you some time.
Yeah.
Sharing resources, sharing experiences, kind of like we're doing right now.
Yeah, man.
Man, if it can help anyone, because you get just bogged down. in
Yeah,
the ministry,
you do.
man.
You do. And I was one of those bivocational guys. I know Jeff Gracia, our current youth guy, is bivocational. And to have resources shared is a blessing. And so maybe we can continue to cultivate that. That could be a work that we do. Dude, thank you for a conversation
man.
about youth ministry. We're going to come back next week, and we're going to talk about Hungary and what God's doing in that work there. So join us next week as I continue a conversation with Pastor Kale Horvath. We're going to be discussing God's calling on his life to the mission field and what it's like to be on deputation and what his vision is for Hungary and what he's expecting when he gets there. There's a lot I want to talk to him about. Thank you for joining us. If you have questions about Living Faith Fellowship and the bond that we have through this fellowship, check out lffellowship.com. You can learn all about us there. If you're interested in the Bible Institute, if you're interested in growing in your faith, growing in your knowledge of God's Word, visit lfbi.org. You can learn all about the Bible Institute there. But in the meantime, we hope that you catch up on all of the podcasts that you missed and check out the YouTube channel as well. Thanks again for joining us.